a message for my people.
Nick Dad, baby. We the new label.
Yeah.
Come on.
Yeah.
Come on, son.
Now this the black sheep sticking its home. I need a crib like I'm Gatsby.
I need it.
In hand, just understand my
Pockets that deep.
with nothing to prove. I ain't got nothing to do. When they can't compete and I got nothing to lose. You see,
All right,
told
George.
me I'm the one that's
Special
gonna
episode of Veterans Minimum in the building. We have UFC coach, owner of Syndicate MMA, and probably his most well-known accolade. He's my head coach too.
That's what when I Googled
We always
his
got to
name,
make it about ourselves.
your face popped up. I was like, what the fuck is
Yeah,
happening
you
here?
know what I'm saying?
Nuts.
John Wood in the building, ladies.
Oh, yeah.
Thank you guys, thank you, appreciate it.
John, there's so much I want to discuss with you, and a lot of it has to do with building a business. Because I don't know if it was you that posted it or maybe the gym posted it. I didn't know how long you've been with Syndicate, like having Syndicate. And the one video that really resonated with me, because I'm like building out the show and building out my business, you've been doing this shit for a while. And you said something before we started recording about 21-year overnight success.
Yeah.
There's a lot to break down in this, but how did you get started with Syndicate?
Man, it's kind of a crazy little thing. I had left Vegas, I think when I was like 17. It was just typical, back then there wasn't much to do in this town except get in trouble. So I was doing that pretty good. And I had to leave town for a little bit, went to Arizona and, got into training as soon as I went out there. I'd always been a huge fan of the UFC. I remember watching the very first UFC at my friend's house, and I was just like, oh my God, this is amazing. Loved it. Didn't really occur to me at that time that it was something I wanted to do, but I had been obsessive, renting all the videotapes and always, buying them, just watching them over and over and over. And went to Arizona and kind of fell into some training, and I just fell in love with the sport. I started doing MMA about 17 years old, 18 years old, and started doing actually like MMA, like all of it together at the same time. I didn't start as a striker. I didn't start as a wrestler. Jiu-jitsu, started doing it all at the same time, putting it together, worked at a couple, trained at a couple good gyms out there. And then about the time I started wanting to think like, man, this is something I think I want to do. Vegas had, the UFC was here. It was kind of popping off. It was starting to pop off. There was only a couple gyms. There was Las Vegas Combat Club, which was my first original gym, and JSEC Jiu-Jitsu and a couple other small places. And I was like, you know what? I'm going to move back to Vegas, move back home and jump into this. And came home, started training at Las Vegas Combat Club. And, Frank Mir was there and Phil Baroni was there. Well, he was there for the first day that I went in. I walked in the door and somebody had submitted him and he flipped out and started punching somebody at the door, picked up a steel chair, threw it through the drywall, and then went out the street and started screaming and freaking out. I was like, oh, okay, I guess this is the place, So that was a weird first day, but fell in love with that, joined up there, started training, doing a lot of jiu-jitsu, fell in love with that. And about a year in, I saw what kind of had a foresight of what the sport was going to do and what it was going to be, how big the UFC was getting, the traction, people that were loving it. And I got into a car wreck and got a small settlement, like 25 grand or something like that. I don't even remember what it was. It might've been less. And I went to my coach at the time and said, hey, how can I invest this money? Can we go in partners in a gym? Can we do something? Can I, how about we open a gym, a small one in a location that's not in a warehouse district or in the, bad part of town. All the gyms back then were, and not the greatest places to get to because it was cheap and it was where you could afford to go. So long story short, we opened up a small, like 2,000 or less square foot Las Vegas Combat Club, in a location up kind of in Summerlin. And it just took off from there, man. And it was the one mistake I thought, I made is that I thought I'd have a gym, open a gym. I was going to be able to train all day and it was just going to be fun. And it was going to be an easy thing. But I learned real quick that if you didn't run it like a business, and it almost failed quite a few times, but I had the mentality to make sure to find what I needed to find out, keep who I needed, get who I needed to bring into the building, the sponsors, the people, and the grind, and found out the hard way real quick that, like I said, you have to treat the gym like a business and just have a never say die attitude. And from there, we went from, back then, whoever whatever sponsor I could get to put the name on the building to have, to keep the doors open. So it went from Las Vegas Combat Club to Zion's Training Center when they were the main sponsor of the UFC. And then from there, I had some buddies that owned some clothing companies and went to Warrior Training Center. They were a clothing company who, came in and put the name on the doors. And they were just, basically paying for some mats and giving me some money to, do some things. And then Throwdown Training Center. And then about that time is where it took hold, and the gym started to pop off, and I knew I wanted to do my own thing. And that's when, after Throwdown, it became Syndicate. And I've had that, for 10, 15 years now. And it's just been, I've survived, this is 21st year owning the gym, survived economic collapses, housing collapses, just everything you can think of. Pandemic.
Yeah.
First, we moved into the building that we're in now. Literally the first week we move in there. And I was freaked out about moving there because we went from 18,000 square feet to 8,000 square feet, knowing that the buildings next to it were going to come up, and, trying to make a business decision where that location was. First week we move in there, boom, shut down from the pandemic. And I'm like, oh my God, this was terrible,
Dude,
and so thought it was over from there.
Bro, it's crazy because I've told you about my food truck story.
Yeah.
Awfully reminiscent of what you're saying now too, because my dad got a coffee truck in New York City for 30 years now. And I dropped out of college because I fell in love with content creating. Yeah. And my dad is like hardcore immigrant, moved here from Greece, like from the gutter kind of thing. He was like, yo, if you drop out of school, I'm not giving you the business. You got to figure this shit out on your own. Yeah. And then I pitched him this idea of like, all right, it's a breakfast cart. We're there from 4 to 11. Let me do lunch from 11 to 6. Now it's the same business kinda, but I'll run that. He was with it. I put $50,000 of my own money. Mind you, I'm making $400 a week. So it took me like 7 years to save $25K. And then my grandma gave me money from the will. She's like, my grandma, God bless, still alive. She's 80, but looks 60. Yeah. She's like, I ain't going nowhere, right? Like this 25K 20 years from now, what the fuck are you gonna do? You're 27 at the time. Like, you need it now, right? Bro, the moment the food truck is ready, pandemic. And New York City, I don't know how it was in Vegas, but in New York, it was a nightmare. So I punted away 50K. Yeah. So the trials and tribulations of that business failing, and then it was a gift and a curse because then the podcast kind of picked up a lot of steam because no one was doing anything, so they needed content. Yeah. When was it the lowest point for you and Syndicate where you were like, fuck, man, I don't want to do this no more?
The crazy, I've never had the moment ever. I've always had a never say die attitude. Like, you're going to have to kill me to get me out of that gym. And that's the mentality it just kind of takes to have something like that, because the gym business, it ain't something you jump into because you're looking to get rich. I've been able to have a nice lifestyle, and now like where we're at, after, like I said, the first 15 years, dude, I was working 2 or 3 jobs still on top of running a gym. I had another job working with my dad, holding pads for people all day, other jobs, filling the void just to pay the rent for the gym. I didn't collect, profits or anything from the gym until the last few years, where I've been able to go, okay, shit, this was worth it. Yeah, I am going to probably have something to hand off to my kids or the next generation of fighters and coaches and people. But I can truly honestly say I've never wanted to quit, and I've never felt like, oh my God, I can't figure it out. There's been some times where I was like, I don't know what the next move is. I think it was 2006, 2007 when the housing collapse, that collapsed and then crashed and everything that was a bad one. That was a bad one. But thank God I've always been able to find the next thing to keep it going. It's always turned up at the right time. On the way up through this sport and, business, I've built a lot of good relationships with a lot of good people, and those people have gotten me where I've, needed to be. I mean, I've gotten into the business, getting into some business and some sponsorships that I knew were going to be terrible, but I had to do it to keep it running, to survive and do it, and then ended up getting out of it and it be a better thing after. There's been a lot of times where I was like, oh shit, I don't know what's next. I don't know how we're gonna do this, but you just have to have that never say die attitude, and just like anything, if it's important enough, you find a way to make it work. There is a point in time and a breaking point for anything that goes, oh shit, this is just done. It doesn't make sense. And I've had partners. Like, this is the first time for the last couple of years, I don't have a partner. You know, I've gotten rid of it to where it's been, but I've had partners all the way through, and those partners are like, no, let's close up shop. We're done, and this isn't worth it. And multiple of those, and they quit. And I'm like, okay, next man up, and figured it out to where now it's like, I guarantee you, some of those guys are wishing they would have stayed in for the long haul. But it is what it is. You know, you just can't quit.
Those were those fighting guys, fighting type business partners? Because it seems to me like those were probably the guys that were able to handle the books, but probably couldn't handle themselves on the mat.
Yeah, there were more business type partners. A lot of people want to get into this because they think it's cool. A lot of people want to look and say, "Oh, I own a gym, right? I'm with these guys."
Right.
You know, it's a big thing, and so, you know, but once that money or things don't go as big, or you know, they're not willing to push through or have to shell out of them. Hey, if they're out, they quit pretty quick. And this is a sport, just like any business. I really feel like if you're lucky enough to get into a business that you love, then you fucking made it.
Yeah.
You know, like that's the thing. If you can get into a business that you love, it doesn't matter. You know, obviously money makes everything kind of work a little bit easier and go, but man, I pinch myself every day. I'm so fortunate to get up, come to the gym, see all you guys. Even on my worst days and I've had some bad days, even recently, you know, almost killed myself with a staph infection and all kinds of crazy shit. And, you know, it's like, even on those days, I'm still, man, this is awesome. I love it. There's nothing better than being able to support yourself through something you love.
100%. Yeah. I think actually it was Alex Volkanovski that said it's an honor and privilege to do what you love and get paid for it. And I was like, that's the greatest quote I think ever.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
When you said about the business partners, were any of them your friends that you tried to go in business with? Because I used to do a show with 5 other guys that I grew up with. And like only one of them now, I still kind of through time, the relationship got good.
Yeah.
But I have a big issue with not being able to mix business and personal. Cause for me, my business is personal for me to survive and do everything I do. So like, it's hard for me I have so many friends to what you said. We're like, damn, dude, I wish I stayed through with the podcast. I wish when I was telling you like, yo, come on, bro, this is dope. Look at this. Now they want in because they've seen what it's turned into. But like, were any of those people your friends, like close friends, or
no? In the beginning, but I learned real quick that's a terrible idea. It's very hard. It's unless you share absolutely the same vision, you're always going to run into issues there. You're going to butt heads. You're going to think this way. They're going to think that way, and it's tough. So at the beginning, yes, they were friends and people that I was closer with, and then it became, let's make some business decisions. And then that even became, I want to make my own decisions. I've obviously done very well, and not by I've learned a lot from watching and being around. I took every opportunity when I was younger to just be in every meeting, every interview with, following Forrest Griffin around, to everywhere. That a lot of stuff just came from that. He'd go, do a photo shoot. And that's how I got the sponsor with Zions, just showing up and realizing that kid, the owner's kid trained at my gym. And one day he's like, hey man, if you ever wanted to do something, yes, I do. Just putting yourself everywhere you can in the business that you want to be in and trying to learn as much as you possibly can. And I've learned the hard way. A couple times, and every time you think you got something figured out, just like fighting, it's, you got to think you got it figured out. Oh, no, they did this.
New shit is coming around. Yeah. Well, the one thing for me is like, and you don't really see it because you're not at the gym often, but I feel like you've built a really good team around you with the coaches that you have, and like the aura and the vibe of the gym is like it's the biggest appeal for me when I go. I just do the jiu-jitsu there, but how would you say I didn't know the word delegate was a thing until like 8 months ago. And then with George, like him and I kind of see the same vision with what it is that I'm building here. And us two have gotten close, like doing the content, but I've been able to hand off a lot of shit to him. Like he runs the social medias for the page. I haven't opened up the Instagram for VM since like September.
It's awesome.
And it's good to know that
that's the
shit,
best.
Man. Cause I like living too, right? Like I like doing my training. I like going to the gym. I like doing, playing my Xbox. That's an escape for me.
100%.
So I've been able to delegate a word I didn't know existed.
Yeah.
How were you able to formulate the team that you have now with the coaches? Like, how is that process?
We have at
like?
the gym, and this is something about 2 years ago, honestly, I really changed everything and worked on the culture, and a culture that that I wanted to be around, a culture that, when you walk into the gym, like you said, you walk in and it's good, man. You can feel it. There's no I don't have to walk into the gym anymore and be like, oh, I hate that guy. I don't want that guy. And people that used to work for me, I'm like, fuck, I hate this guy.
Right.
I can't, it's just go away.
Yeah.
This was a hard lesson I learned, like I said, a couple of years ago. I was doing a lot of stuff by myself, not by necessarily wanting to. I was bringing some other coaches in and some people and friends, and the vision, I had let things go on too long a certain way. I wasn't, I was always, coming up as a fighter here. I came up in this town and I trained a lot of the guys that I ended up, coaching towards the end were guys that used to be my training partners and whoop my ass all the time. And so it was hard to make the transition from being a fighter to a respectable coach. So it took a lot of extra grind, and I was doing a lot of it myself. And I just didn't have the right crew around me at the time. And actually, when the pandemic happened and all the stuff, kind of was falling apart, but the UFC was still going. So one thing that was pretty crazy, it was a curse and a blessing. All the fighters were, people were just moving. Fighters were moving here, flocks, because the PI's here, the UFC's here. They were moving here because fights were dropping off. People were testing positive all the time. And it's like, if you wanted to jump into the UFC, and a lot of guys did, a lot of guys snuck in, the COVID fighters snuck in through people falling out. You just had to be here. So we got flooded with a ton of fighters, talented fighters and people. And I kind of got caught with my pants down in the situation where it was like, I wasn't prepared for it. So a lot of the guys that I had brought up, weren't getting the attention. We had an extra 30 guys, 40 guys on the mat. And it really, it became tough, working with everybody. And I realized right then and there, and I didn't have a crew and a staff at the time that was reliable and people that I just could trust. And it just wasn't working well. And so through that, I actually lost a couple guys. A couple fighters were like, a couple of my babies that came up ended up bailing. And that was like some of it was on me, some of it was on them. It was going to happen either way. But, I had a crew, a little small exodus of 4 or 5 guys. And a couple things all hit at the same time. And it really was like a wake up call to me where I had to go, oh shit. What can I do better? How can I do things better? And I started reading a lot, looking at a lot of different books. There's a few books that really changed the way I looked at things and my outlook. And I just started, the number one thing, I started going to other coaches, higher level coaches. I'm friends with some of the guys fortunate enough that are at the highest levels, guys from ATT, guys that just been doing it the right way for a long time. And I started talking every day. What should I do? How do you do it? What do we do? And really started kind of picking everybody's brain, reading a lot of books. And man, the thing that kept coming back was the culture. I needed to change the culture, and I needed to get a staff and a crew that I could rely on. And everything, I can't tell you, the second I made that switch in my mind, the right people just showed up. And it was crazy, the right people were there. And I said, oh man, not just 1, but 2, 3, 4, oh shit, 5. And that's the crew that we have running for just the MMA team. It happened with Jerry. I tried to get Jerry Shapiro and the Schaap brothers, Jerry and Shane Shapiro, who are freaking amazing. We wouldn't have the success at the gym we have right now, if it wasn't for them and the program that they run. I tried to get Jerry a few years before I did. I saw in him, I've had a good eye for talent. Like, dude, you should come over here. And he was very loyal to his situation, but it didn't work out. So he came to me and said, hey, I want to do this jiu-jitsu program. It's still an option. Put him in there, and you could just see the culture of jiu-jitsu changed. And Jerry is a partner in the gym now just because he's done such a phenomenal job at doing what he does. Say, hey, I'm going to give you a piece of this. And everything has just come together in this last year. And like I said, 2 years ago, I couldn't say if you walked in there that you would feel what you feel now, top to bottom. Every coach, the MMA program, and you see it in the success. I think last year we had a record of, I think it was 76 wins and 19 losses. It's a phenomenal record for
it is
at the highest levels. That wouldn't happen. We've always had a winning record, but things have just changed. Jiu-jitsu is killing it. Our striking program's killing it. And we've got 16, 17,000 square feet and we're busting at the seams. We need a bigger place. And it's awesome. It's awesome to have those kind of problems.
for sure.
So just changing the culture, delegating, like you said, knowing that you can't do it all yourself. That's the biggest thing. My wife, retired from the UFC and she's now running the front. Best decision ever. She just kills it. So knowing that I walk in and my front desk staff, my assistant Emily, who she is helping out with the fighters and the fight team. She helps run the front. My wife, everybody from top to bottom, things are just running like a well-oiled machine now. So it's a really good feeling.
Yeah, way less of a headache to have the people that you trust.
Bro, it's amazing.
Yeah. You said something interesting there, and I've wanted to ask you this, and I feel like, I don't know how many people have asked you this, and I think you could trust me. And if this doesn't make the podcast, it's because we took it out. You mentioned fighters leaving you. Is there a part of you when they leave, you kind of wish, I don't want to say bad like physically, but like, you kind of don't want them to do as well.
Nick is super petty, is what he's getting at. And he's like,
Listen,
how petty are you?
Human nature is petty in itself. It's ego. All our own egos get into that. I'd be a liar if I didn't go, it didn't piss me off or didn't hurt me. Of course it did, but the biggest thing is there's some of them, like I said, there's a couple of the guys that left and a couple of them come back. Like most of them have come back or talked about it. And so it is what it is. There's a couple of them that I'm directly responsible for and I take responsibility. One thing I've looked at or trying to really change in my life is good, bad, and different. What responsibility can you take in that situation? Where is my, what could I have done better? What, ownership in the situation? What kind of ownership can I take in this? Where did I fail this person? Or where could I have done better? Where in any situation, even if I don't think I'm at fault, I try to find a situation now of where I could have done better. And the one thing is that years ago, I would say maybe thinking that thought where it's like, man, I hope this guy, but like, that's just a negative output where I just feel like if you start to think that way, it takes you down a rabbit hole and it can lead to other things. And I just always, I don't want to wish bad on somebody and then have somebody bad, wishing bad on me and some things happen in that effect. It hurts, I ain't gonna lie. Somebody leaves you if you were close to them, or especially the way fighters do it. There's no real, like most guys don't have a nuts to come up to you and say, hey man, most of them don't even tell you that I have issues.
They just bounce.
And then you see whatever. And you're like, oh, and then, you take them out of the group chat and they get butt hurt. And, oh, you took me out of the group chat. Motherfucker, you laughed.
Yeah, you're not with us.
Training with you're training with new people. What do you want? Like, it's pretty funny, but, you just have to, like I said, take ownership top to bottom in what you could have done better, why these people left, and hope that you do that better so you don't lose more. And I try not to have, I've learned, like I used to do that thing where I'd see something on Instagram. And honestly, if I see something now, I'll block it or I'll put it on mute. If I don't try to feel that way. It's just a negative mindset, negative outlook on how that, like I said, it can take you down a place. So everybody that left, anybody, like I said, we're talking a few people, I wish the best of them. Even if I don't really feel that way, I'm still going to try to make myself feel that way. I wish the best for them. And let's try to leave it at that.
Yeah, well, you're better than I am.
Yeah,
because I don't feel that way.
I mean, listen, there's a couple people I wouldn't.
No, like we've talked about this in the past too. Like this idea that you do something shitty to me and I have to forgive you so I can feel better. That is like the dumbest take that I think. I want you to, if you feel a certain way about me, you are more than entitled to that.
100%.
Right? For sure. But I'm not going to forget it.
Yeah.
Like the amount of people that were like, oh, dude, why are you doing this podcast? Why are you doing this? It's like, well, I think I made the right decision, right? Yeah. So now when I see them reach out to me about certain things, they're like, I work with Mason Cameron on this show. We're going on tour. I've had people hit me up for tickets. I'm like, oh, you want tickets? You picked the right one to come and ask for tickets. Cause I'll be like, hey, John, don't you remember what you said that I was wasting my time doing this? Yeah. So I'm a little bit different. Like I use that as fuel. It's not a crutch for me.
Well,
like
it doesn't,
for me, it's like, nah, you're going to be reminded for this.
Well, I use it to try, like I said, to better myself. I'm dealing with a lot of, like I said, we have 65, 70 pros right now. That's not even the amateurs, so I can't get caught up in somebody else's bullshit because it's going to affect one of these other people. Fair. And, like I said, I always look at those things. Why did I fail here? How can I do it better? I'm not sitting there, being, man, I hope you go do it. No, you made your choice. And if you did it, there's one guy I can say in the last 10 years that came to me and was like, hey man, you know what? Just to let you know, I think I'm going to go try something else out and, you know, no hard feelings. I love it here and blah, 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 blah. And he did it the right way. And that dude, I would let him come back in a heartbeat anytime, you know, like I respect that.
Yeah.
Have enough respect to somebody to say, hey dude, listen, like I'm not happy with what you're doing and, you know, maybe we can fix it. But I'm not, like I said, there's a lot of guys that have, you know, I'm not gonna say done me dirty, but you know, they you did a lot for them and they kind of give you the, you know, whatever.
Yeah.
You kind of you're
I ain't
scrolling
rooting for him.
Right.
I ain't going, man, I hope you do, you know, but I
Yeah.
ain't also like sitting there going, it is what it is.
Yeah.
It's just, that's human nature.
It sounds like when a player gets traded in the NFL and they find out on Twitter and
Yeah.
like, did you ever find anybody out on social media? You're like, wait a second,
Oh,
that's where this
very
motherfucker's
recently.
been. Oh,
very recently, I saw something on there and I was like, went to some of the other coaches, like, did you know, like, this was just announced? And, you know,
Completely
okay, cut
shocked
from
you
the
guys.
team, took him off the chat, and then I ended up being the bad guy for, you know, kicking somebody out of the chat. I was like, well, but you know, like if I'm dating a girl and I don't see you for a little bit, and then all of a sudden I see you on Instagram and you're with another dude, I assume we're
done.
over. And
Yeah,
okay,
yeah.
peace. You know, it is what it is. But yeah, it happens all the time. That's usually how you find out.
Interesting. And so now you've definitely had the evolution. I'm assuming you haven't been like training the amount of UFC fighters or professional MMA fighters the entire 20 years. Kind of 70. Well, you said you're at what, 65?
We're a lot. Like,
to
listen,
70
this isn't the
professionals?
first time that Syndicate has been big. Like, the one thing that I've lacked in the gym is I don't do a lot of self-promotion. I don't do a lot of this kind of stuff. I have started recently because it's good for what we do and the level.
Mhm.
But I've always, from day one, been working, you know, with around big names and working with, I've always had, you know, big people at my gym and Forrest Griffin and lots of, you know, OGs from the sport all the way through. There's never been a time where we weren't competing at a good level. And there was times where I think, you know, 5-6 years ago, there was a run we went on, like, I think we won like 5 or 6 UFC fights in a row within like 8 weeks. And you have these times where it excels up and everybody's like, oh man, you're the new hot thing. And then it dumps and then they move on to the next thing. And if you're not one of the big like names, the American top teams or, you know, something like that, you don't get looked at as much. Right now, obviously, I think, you know, with the changes we made, we're on a great run.
Mhm.
And I think we're pretty sure we're here to stay, you know,
Yeah.
but like we've had lots of success over the years. There's been some down times, you know, like I've never had it in 20 years. We've never had like a losing year where the team didn't do great, but we're definitely at the highest level
Mhm.
right now that we've ever been at with, you know, world champions and competing, you know, and with Khalil Roundtree right there, you know, and I think he'll be back in that situation again. And we're just we keep getting younger and better fighters. So I think we're going to, you know, like I said, sustain at the top for a while.
For sure. Yeah. I mean, I would guess I was just trying to hit it from the point of like you have a gym in which like Nick gets his work in and then you got these pros. Explain to me the balance of like how much efforts are given to high level fighters and how much effort is given to.
So that's again, it's a business. So we have a full jiu-jitsu program. We have a full, you know, Muay Thai program, wrestling, boxing, the whole deal. Those are split different from the fighters. Now the fighters are also in those programs. You roll with,
Yeah.
I'm sure you've rolled with so many pros and stuff in jiu-jitsu and guys, you'll see, you know, you go into the morning jiu-jitsu and there'll probably be 5-6 UFC guys in there training with the guys.
Mhm.
We kind of have a mixture of everything going on, but the pro practice is set aside from, you know, I do that in downtime
Got it.
in the morning when the gym clears out and all of the you know, the regular people aren't there. So we have our closed sessions, you know, for that. And it's a balance, you know, the fighters and having a big name and a big, you know, obviously, people watching these guys on TV, then being able to come in the gym and see them. I was standing at the desk yesterday and this Georgian guy came in and was signing up and never met Merab, you know, and was like, hey, we got a lot of Georgian guys here. And then Merab walks through the door and he's just like,
Oh,
Yeah.
you know, that's a good selling point.
Yeah,
That
sure.
dude signed up, you know,
Yeah.
so it's good to have that, and you have to have a little separation, but the balance we have right now is really great. Like I said,
Sounds like
all our pros in the culture from top to bottom, from our everyday students to our professionals, they all intermingle. Like we don't have any dickheads on the gym in the team right now. Like that is something I tell guys right off the bat. Like, listen, if you know you got a big ego and you're here to like, we train hard, but if you're here to be a dick and prove how tough you are to everybody and try to start fights and shit and not do what we need to do, just pack it up and go on down the street. You know, and there's other gyms that'll take that, no problem. So we have a certain culture with that, and it intermingles well with how we do it. You know, and Jerry, like our head, you know, jiu-jitsu coach, he flows in and trains. I bring him in, you know, a day or two to work with the fighters, and he's in with the regular people, the regular Joes every day. So we have a great balance, and it just, the one plays off the other, you know. And just like I said, you walk into our gym, you go in there right now, and there's 150 people on the mat, and they're all having a great time. So it's something that like one scratches the other's back. You know, it's awesome to have, like I said, you've got pros in there sitting there with the regular people, and kids program. Like my son trains jiu-jitsu every day, and you know, Merab's his favorite fighter, and Merab will get in there and wrestle around with the kids and say hi to everybody, and it's awesome. So
it does sound fun.
Yeah, the coolest shit though is like when you see the people that come in and they try to get their comeuppance on a fighter, and then they get fucking mauled. That's always like, you gonna find out. Because they try to, you know, they're like, oh shit, Merab's on the mat. Let me roll Merab. And it's like, bro, they want to turn up.
Yeah.
They will, and it's like, it's a wrap.
God,
You know what I
that's
mean?
so crazy.
So it's cool. It's cool. I like seeing that too, because there's levels to it, whatever.
Oh yeah.
Right? So like one of the questions I wanted to ask you, when it comes to the fight game, you know how you always hear in other sports, like they got the it factor.
Sure.
Right? What is it in fighting that you could see someone do that you're like, yo, he can be a pro. He has the it factor. What is it in fighting?
There's so many levels to the it factor, but it is a real thing. Like you can see somebody the first day and go, oh shit, this guy's got potential. And I was telling one of my UFC fighters tonight, I'm like, listen, I'm gonna be honest with you. You have championship potential. You have championship qualities. To say, oh, you're going to be a champion one day, that's such a stupid thing to say. Like there's so much that goes into that. You have to have, you know, talent, hard work, you know, you got to be just skilled, disciplined, and there's a lot of luck involved in it. Being in the right place, right time, not being injured, getting the call when you need to get the call. It's crazy, but so many things as a coach you look at where, you know, talent can be there. Like you get in, you're just a naturally talented kid at something, and you're like, oh shit. You know, okay, this guy's got the talent. Does he have the work ethic? Does he have the time, the skill to show up? All those things together start to form qualities that can be, you know, championship potential. Or at least I even tell guys now, like you can be a ranked fighter. If you can get to a number on in the UFC, you're doing well. But to even get in the top 10, to sniff the top 10, it's tough. It takes a lot. You know, like I said, there's a lot of things that go into that. But
is it like they hit a pad? Is it like
it's multiple things. Like there's guys, you know, I'll tell you this. I've seen so many guys that I know that could have made it to the UFC and not even made it to the UFC, but made it big in the UFC. They could have been contenders. And I've seen so many of them not make it. And it's usually factors outside of the gym. The easiest part of these guys' day is to come in and have me and the team yell at them, tell them what to do. It's, can you handle life out there? Can you juggle your family? Can you juggle your money, your girls, you know, the social media, all this stuff? Can you handle that? That's the biggest thing. If they've got that on point and they're willing to come in, do the work, like hard work and dedication, that only goes so far. That'll take you far. Mm-hmm. But you got to have hard work, dedication, talent, and some luck in getting the call at the right time, being in the right place, doing what you need to do, and being ready. The UFC, like, man, if you get a 6-week camp, it's pretty good. If you get an 8-week camp, that's phenomenal. Like a lot of the ways that you, especially getting in, it's short notice. It's take the call and you know, go for it. It's just, there's a lot of factors that go into the it factor. And like someone like Khalil is a perfect example. Early on, like I started working with Khalil, I think when he had just turned pro. I got him 2 fights, we went in, he killed it. He had a great, he was just a monster. And he was like the next, he was knocking out legends. There was stories about him and Anderson Silva and Vanderlei Silva, like doing things behind the scenes that don't get done to those guys. He was like the underground legend for a while. And he ended up, I was training his brother, Donovan Freelo, and he brought me Khalil, and we all started working together, and great. A couple wins. And I remember one day, like, he's like, man, I think I got a really good construction job. I'm making good money. I don't know if I want to fight anymore. Bro, what? Like, what? Like, no. You are too good to not do this. Like, you are too talented to not do this. And so I said, just give me 6 months. Give me 6 months. Let's see what happens. 6 months. He was on The Ultimate Fighter. He had a good run, and he got submitted in there by actually one of his teammates and came off. And then he got hurt, and he ended up in the finals. It didn't go our way, but he popped into the UFC right after that. And there was never a doubt in my mind from day one that dude had the potential to go do what he did, a few months ago with Alex Pereira, that he could be a champion, that he, probably would be a champion. But it took a long time for him in his mindset. We had a couple good fights and fought in the UFC, and we parted ways, and he went to, Thailand for a little bit and was gone. And that one was one that hurt too. And I lost him, but it was on good terms. It was just, he needed to go be him. He wasn't ready. And a lot of people were touting him, you got so much talent, so much this, you should be the next big thing. But in the big picture was just too big for him at the time. He came back from Thailand. We started training together, and we went on this great, I think, 6-fight, streak, 5 finishes and some bonuses, and then got the title fight. And he came back just different and ready, and all the pieces started coming together. So not only is it like seeing the potential, but the time frame, the maturity of being able to handle those things. I don't think a few years ago he was just as talented, but he wasn't ready to handle it. He's ready to handle it now. He can handle those things. He's good. His mindset, he grew up, and became a better man, a better fighter, all these things. And so did I too, as a coach. And so we came back together at the same time, and you kind of get that. You've got to get that streak where all of a sudden everything's firing all cylinders, and you just have the right time, right place, right people. And that's more of it, than I think anything else. Just hitting that streak and that stride at the right time with the right people. There's a lot of it factor guys out there. There's a lot of guys like, holy shit, this dude is a freaking stud on jiu-jitsu, but his hands suck. Or this guy's a striking monster, but he can't do shit on the ground. This guy's got everything, but his cardio sucks. It's like you got to have all of it to get to that next level. It's we've got shit, dude. I've got 30 guys with the it factor right now that I think, man, these guys can make it. How far? How many champions? That's up to them. We'd have to see. Damn. But it's a little different in fighting. And same thing in any other sports. You see these guys that are monsters in college. Mm-hmm. Heisman Trophy winners come out, it's just a different level. So I try to train my guys all the way from the bottom. I tell them all the time, we train for this, even when you're competing down here. So when you get there, we're ready to do it. It's not... Yeah. And that's what happened. Like I said, a lot of guys in COVID, I'm ready for UFC, great records, this, that, and the other, jumped in and then just got swallowed up, maybe not maturity level, right. Not ready. Right. And not training on that level. It was interesting.
Yeah. Staying on that topic, we're going to start to wind down soon. A couple more questions, the guys in the control room. I could talk to you for hours, man. I really enjoy this conversation. What you as a coach, right? Is there any different approach to a main event fight for a title in the UFC? And then, like, if you were cornering me in a 3-round, 2-minute exhibition amateur fight, like, is your approach the same? I feel like it isn't, but from a coach's standpoint, what's the approach for that?
To be honest, the only difference is what the intensity is, like, are we obviously amateurs and guys? I try to take every fight as it's the biggest fight. We're getting in, we're jumping in. This is the biggest fight I've ever had. I try never to have that, like, oh, these guys are, and there is a hierarchy. Obviously, sure. There's a hierarchy to the guys that have earned that, get a little more attention, a little more private, a little more this, a little more that. And that's where, like I said, the delegation and having coaches Dude, there was a month straight, I think a month or two ago, where every one of my coaches, myself included, we were all in different parts of the country and different parts in the world. And it was like a 15 fight win streak. That was the best feeling of my life, knowing that those guys were able to handle shit, knowing that they ran a couple camps for me. They did this. They made sure everything was good. When I go away now, it's not like, oh my God, who's going to run practice or who's holding pads for these guys. We have an awesome crew right now. My coaches are phenomenal. And so I try to make sure that, because honestly, for every fighter, that is the biggest fight of your life. Your next fight is the biggest fight of your life. Right. It's the most important fight of your life. So I've fought before. I've been in the situations. I know how important it is to have that person and that safety net. So if I'm involved with it, I'm trying to run. I think I've got, me personally right now, I think I'm involved in like 20 camps, 15 camps. And I'm delegating some of those things. I can't obviously do everything all day. So my other guys are taking, I try to get, the bigger camps, obviously like with Merab or something like that. I'm working with them probably every day. I've got some kind of hands on that. Whereas like some of the lower, guys that are coming up, I'm trying to get, 2 or 3 days with them, and then they're with another coach 2 or 3 days. But it's such an important thing, man. I never want to get to a point in time where if I'm available to do a camp, I'm going to do a camp. If I'm available to corner, I'm going to corner. I love this shit so much. Like I said, even this is way better than flipping a burger or being out digging a ditch or doing a podcast. It's way better. No, it's way better than any of that stuff that I could think about, So I try to keep the mentality of being, humble. And like I said, doing even promotion or even talking about this stuff, it's been kind of weird for me of like promoting myself or the gym or the team. It's not something I feel like as a coach, you're the guy behind the guy, and that's what we're there for. Mm-hmm. If I get asked to do something or an interview, it's like, it's such a, oh man, that's, that's awesome, man. It's because my guys, our fighters, our team has done so well. It's not me out there promoting it. It's just hey, we're going to talk to it, So every fight's super important.
Nah, for sure, man. Yeah. And the one thing that I think it was Vince Morales' fight that like you flew all the way to Paris for. So that was pretty dope too.
I was in Khalil's camp.
Yeah.
And we were in Utah for 2 weeks acclimating, and Vince picked up that fight in like 7 days notice. So I had to go talk to Khalil and say, hey man, because that's literally the biggest fight that you could get, So I had to go ask Khalil, hey, are you good with me jetting out on a Friday, flying to Paris, for a day, showing up for Vince, and then I'll jet right back, And he's like, yeah, man. He's like, I know how hard Vince has worked to do that. Absolutely. So that's the thing, dude, is like, and I don't want to just show up. I work with Vince all the time. I don't want to just show up for a camp if I haven't been involved in it, unless it's, such a moral support thing. So I try to make sure that I'm involved, in everything that I can be. But like I said, if it's dude, like the schedule I got coming up is insane. I got a call today from somebody who got offered a fight in Australia on the UFC card. And I've got, sandwiched in Merab the week after. I've got 3 guys. I've got 2 guys I've got Merab and another guy on that card. Then I'd have to fly to Australia, come back, and then I've got 3 UFC fighters in the next card, and it's just boom, boom, boom. Every weekend we have something. And I was thinking in my head, I'm like, oh my God, how am I going to do this?
We do this over Zoom?
I'm going to do it. Like, I don't know how I'm going to do this. I'm going to be dead, but there's like, it's crazy. And not only with all this shit is like juggling my wife and my kid and my family. Thank God they're in the gym all the time. So that makes it a lot easier.
Right.
And I left the gym to come over here, and my kid's doing jiu-jitsu. My wife's at the front. So I get the hugs and kisses and see everybody, and still spend as much time as I can with them. But it's a lot, it's crazy.
Yeah. This is the last question for me. And I want to just ask about Merab, because he's been on the show before. By the way, fighters that come on the show after, we're 9-0. So
perfect.
Yes. Perfect timing for you coming on. Dude, I remember when he fought O'Malley, like the confidence everyone had in the gym in him. I was like, yo, how do you guys feel? And like, they're like, bro, you have it's a lock. It's a layup. I'm like, really? They're like, you guys were like overly confident. Right? And that was the first time that I ever experienced that. Because, we have a lot of fighters, and I'm really close with Jerry at the gym, as you've seen. Yeah. And like, I'll be like, yo, how do you feel about the fight? And he'll give me an honest assessment, right? But with Merab, it was like, bro, we're not even worried. And I was like, and then you see the fight turn out. And I was like, holy shit.
They were right.
Yeah, they were right. How do you feel about the fight coming up this weekend?
You know, just to touch on that, like that was such a crazy experience. 306, Noche was such a huge thing. That was one of the first times I've ever experienced where literally every day there's a UFC, the behind the scenes filming, the lead up to the fight. It's on TV every day. You're watching yourself. You're watching this. When that first came out, that fight came out, we were the favorite. And then it flipped because so much hype was on O'Malley. There was a time where I was like, Jesus, can we beat this guy? Like, oh my God, he's like this. Like, we're gonna Merab's gonna die. He's gonna go out there and get knocked out in the first punch. Oh my God, and you're like, okay, wait. So it's kind of funny because after that thing, there was something. I went back and I watched a lot of Merab's fights. During that process every night, I started watching his fights, and a couple things came out of that and clicked. And I went to Merab and I said, hey, let's do this. And it was something that flipped him right. He's like, oh yeah. And it flipped and it actually like played out in the fight. I knew obviously if we didn't get clipped in that right off the bat, it was going to go the way it did. And when that first takedown hit, I was like, oh my God, this is going to be an easy night. This is going to be great. And they couldn't touch him. And, but it worked out great. Do I think that like this fight is another one all of a sudden where, it's flipped and Umar is the favorite and it's like, Jesus, what does Merab have to do to become the favorite? But Umar is a tough, very, very tough guy. He's a very, very skilled guy. Like, that name carries a lot of weight. Is there a little more hype on it than I think there should be? Sure. If he went out there and had finished Sandhagen, and just beat him and smashed him, then I'd be like, okay.
Right.
But that fight went to decision. It wasn't anything, oh my God. He's a great fighter, obviously comes from a great lineage, great camp. Like there's nothing but respect. It's a great deal. He's a good opponent. He's a great opponent to fight. But do I think that it's, are we buying into the hype of Umar and the push that he's obviously got from the UFC and there's a lot of money behind him and things going on? I don't think it's going to go and be as easy as O'Malley because I think this guy is a lot more well-rounded than O'Malley. But do I think it's going to be this unstoppable monster? We're going to go out and get taken down and subbed and, 30 seconds? No. Merab's going to go out there and do what Merab does. And the greatest thing that Merab has going for him is these guys just don't understand. He's a different animal. You hear it, it's cliched, oh, he's different. It's the best camp ever. This, all these things. But it is, this guy, like, he looks 10 times better than he did for O'Malley. He's the best sparring I've seen him do. He is just a different machine. And when you get in there and the pace that he puts on, this dude does, and I'm not kidding, he'll do 9-10 rounds. He'll do his 6 rounds in the cage, high level guys with Aljo, with other guys pushing him, grappling him. And then he goes out, say you're done. And then literally I got other rounds that I'm cornering people. He'll be in the corner sparring somebody. When I left tonight, somebody called me like, hey, Merab's in the back sparring.
Let him out of the cage, bro.
Put him back in the cage. Like, he's a guy, you can't keep him out of the gym, but that's his method. That's what he does. So you don't want to change that. Let's just put it this way. I truly believe that Merab will come out with that belt wrapped around his waist still. Is it going to be a tough fight? Yeah, I think so. I think it's going to be a good one. I think they match up well, but is he going out there and getting submitted or knocked out? No, it's not going to happen.
Fuck yeah.
Yeah.
Got fired up, bro.
Yeah, no, same. And you answered the question that I was going to ask, but I guess you can break down the percentages. The amount of film that you watch leading into a fight, is it more or less than what we would think? And I'll just tell you right now, I think that for fighting, you probably don't need to watch too much film. If your best on best is better than his, it doesn't matter what you're studying. But then you said, I'm watching O'Malley. I see a couple of things. Like, what are you looking for, and how long do you spend on
I don't
watching?
spend a ton of time on the other guy. Like, I go and you get your concept. We have a film day at the gym with my coaches. We sit down and we'll have lunch and we'll break down film on different guys every week. And then I'll go home and I'll watch a little bit. I'll like the night before session, I'll break down. I'm like, when the fight gets announced, I go and I watch all my film and I get my study out and I take my notes. But I focus more on my guy.
Got it.
And I really do. I really focus more on what I'm looking for as what a coach would be looking for to do to us, what somebody would be trying to break down, where our weaknesses, I figure, always is. I train my guys, like our practices, we don't do a specific, hey, we're going to do a wrestling and jiu-jitsu. We do something more based on that, but it's MMA. It's MMA every day, and we train to be ready for everything.
Smart.
You know, so I watch tape. I don't obsess about it. I don't think that, like, for me, I've never had to sit there and go, oh my God, I gotta, there's this secret thing. Like, you can break somebody down, in my opinion, watching 3 or 4 fights. And what I'll do is I'll watch a few fights, the most recent, and I'll go back as far as I can and watch something that they have old fights and see if there's glaring similarities, that they do the same things, and you know what you're getting into.
Right.
But I also look at the fact that each fighter is doing the same thing we're doing. They're trying to get better. So the last version of this guy, he might have been shitty in that fight. He might not be so shitty now.
Right.
So we have to account for, hey, he may do this. We're going to look for that. But if it doesn't come, who cares? On to the next thing. If you shoot in and he's shitty takedown defense, but we go to shoot in and he stops us, who cares? We're good with whatever happens. Like, I don't over game plan for the fact that you see this all the time. The game plan fails and the fighter keeps trying to, it's like ramming your head into that wall and seeing what's going to break first.
Right.
If it's not working, I need to find a different way around the wall. So I try to get them I don't try to obsess about, you got to do that. There are some glaring things. Like, obviously there's some glaring things with Umar. We need to make sure that this is accounted for. But let's also not make sure, like, if we get put there, we're not going to panic. But maybe he doesn't put us there. So don't think, and that's something like with Sandhagen. I thought Sandhagen fought a great fight, but I also think at some point in time he forgot to fight his fight too. He stopped him completely, and then sometimes that's what happens. You overly account for this, and then all of a sudden you forget to do this.
Very interesting.
Well, I'm excited. UFC 311 this weekend. Co-main. We're Team Merab, obviously. Your social media is at Bigwood MMA 702, the owner and head coach of Syndicate MMA, John Wood. Yo, I could have talked to you way longer too, but we do need to wrap it up. I appreciate your time. I know how busy you are, like you were emphasizing before. Thanks for coming on the show. George, any last words for Coach Wood?
Let's go Merab.
Let's go Merab, baby. Yeah.
Appreciate you guys. Thanks for having me on. It's cool. I come back anytime.
Hell yeah. Hell yeah. Come back with the title. Big ups to the members of the Patreon. We got Arabia, Daniel Gibson, Mahul Patel, Thomas Robinson, Abel Rezin, Ben Kotzian, Christopher Velasquez, Derek Platees, Devin Rendon, Dylan Chadwick, Jerry Shapiro, Jordan Riley, Mike Stevens, Nicholas Messina, and Nick Crummage. Guys, patreon.com/veterans minimum. George, we don't ask for too much.
No. $1.
$1 American is all we're asking for a month. It comes out to like 3 cents a day. You won't even realize that on your statements.
2 cups of coffee a year.
2 cups of coffee a year. Hell, if you pledge for the whole year, it's the cost of 2 cups of coffee, because you get 2 months free when you pledge for the entire year, no matter what tier you're in. So patreon.com/veterans minimum. The goals have changed. We're trying to get to 5,000 $1 contributors.
It's possible.
We're going to
$1 away.
5-figure Patreon our way with $1 American. Just imagine what do you think? Like a spunky, spicy 28-year-old at Sapphire.
Yep.
Or maybe Crazy Horse. Maybe the Rhino. I don't know why I know all the names of these establishments, but they're good establishments. 11 in Miami. Yo Soy Fiesta. You know what I'm saying? $1 American. That's all we're asking for. Patreon.com/veterans minimum. So there you have it. John Wood, owner and head coach at Syndicate MMA. Good luck to him and our boy Merab, the champ at 135 bantamweight, as they go into this co-main this weekend at UFC 311. And speaking of UFC 311, we have another special guest on this one, Mckenzie Pavacich.
There you go.
There you go. I got it.
Confidence, Nick.
Yeah, I wasn't, I wrote it down, but I'm like, I don't want to butcher it because I said it the first time the right way. Producer and reporter for the UFC. One of my friends here in Vegas. We trained together over at Syndicate also, where John Wood is the owner of. I've been wanting to talk to you for a while. We've tried to set this up a couple times, but you have a fucking outrageous schedule. I feel like when I do see you, I'm like, oh shit, Mackenzie's not flying all over the world. And this weekend UFC is in LA, it's in California. Tell me a little bit about that, like the travel schedule that you have, because if I'm not mistaken, I think there was one stretch this past year where like Zach was telling me, or you were telling me at the gym, we're like, yeah, I'm packing like 3 suitcases because you're just not coming home for 7 weeks. So what's the travel like as a UFC content creator?
It's wild. It's absolutely wild. And sometimes you have to take a step back and be like, oh, I have to go to Abu Dhabi this weekend and then Paris next weekend, and see how ridiculous that sounds to be like, oh, I have to go do this thing. So I do my best to not ever say that. I get to go to the coolest places on planet Earth. It is the best job, the dream job, but it gets a little tiring, a little taxing for me. It's usually around like August, September, I start to really feel it, which is pretty good. That's like 8 months of steady, nonstop. We've got 10 weeks off a year. So if you do the math, 42 events, just UFC events. We do a bunch of other stuff too. The travel is wild. It's sometimes like you'll be at the airport. We'll have just worked 14 plus hours, not slept, barely showered. You get to the airport and people are just like, they're just normal people going to wherever they're going. And you look around, you're like, they have no idea what we just did, what we just accomplished. Now I'm getting on the plane, haven't slept. The people next to you are like, where are you? Why were you in Brazil? Why were you wherever we are? And it's harder to explain the job. So I usually just, I'm just here for work on my way back, and don't really say much more. But you guys get to see a little bit more because you see me every day. And it's usually the Monday after I get back from wherever I am. I make a point to try to go in every Monday always, because some semblance of like a routine is, when I'm here in Vegas, is so important, because the rest of the time, half of the time when I'm not here, there's a bit of a road routine, but like, it's crazy. I have my road life and I have my life here in Vegas. And I'm blessed to have friends and training partners and the greatest husband ever that lets me do this job and supports me in doing it. But yeah, it's literally like living a double life sometimes, because I go and I'm interviewing John Jones, and then I get back on Monday and 16-year-olds are kicking my butt in jiu-jitsu. So it's like double life for sure. It's a lot of fun though.
Shit, man. I remember recently actually the what pay-per-view was it just now that passed in December? What number? Well, that was 310. 310, right?
Yeah.
I ran into the +1. Shouts to Zach, Coach Zach, one of my good friends here in Vegas. He went to the event with some of the guys. And I was like, yo, bro, are you waiting for Mckenzie? He's like, bro, Mackenzie's not getting out of this until like well after midnight. He's like, I'm going to be in bed by then. And then I started thinking, because I'm originally from New York. You're East Coast too, right?
New Jersey.
So I would go to cards on the East Coast. I'll never forget. We went to Covington Usman at MSG. And I remember my buddy Nick, who I used to do the show with, huge hardcore UFC fan. We get into his car and it's 1:45 in the morning. Yeah. And I was like, bro, this is trash. I hate how late it is here. So like, as a diehard sports fan, Mckenzie, I love the West Coast. Like, Sunday Night Football ends at 8:15, 8:30. I could go get a workout in. I could go out to dinner, and it's not like, dude, in the East Coast, you want to go to sleep. It's like midnight. So I applaud you, because sometimes those hours are just crazy.
They're wild. We did an overnight UFC 304 in Manchester this summer. The first fight was at like 11 p.m. or something. That was crazy. It
11 p.m.
local time. Local time. So for pay-per-views, it's always going to be like East Coast prime time, like 99% of the time. There's a couple places, depending on a bunch of factors, where we might do a local prime time, but chances are East Coast, first fight's at like 6 p.m., 6:30 maybe. When we're here in Vegas, like you said, first fight's at like 3. We might get out of there by like midnight, maybe 1. But the East Coast shows are crazy, because those are the ones like you want to try to maybe get the first flight home. Like you're going to be cutting it close. So Miami, for example, is one that for some reason comes to mind. I think I had like a 7 a.m. flight or something. And I was like checking my watch every 5 seconds, waiting for the main event winner to come do the interview so I could pack everything up, get it on the truck, get back to the hotel just to like wash my face and get all my makeup off, change my clothes, throw all my stuff into a suitcase, and then go. it's like very rock and roll, honestly, what we do. And it's funny to say that because it's working in sports, but that's always what I equate it to is like we show up, traveling circus comes into town, we unpack, we kind of take over whatever city we're in for the week. And then just like that, the event's over, Octagon's broken down and in a shipping container within 3 hours, maybe. And we're gone. And then it's on to the next city, on to the next event, whatever it might be. Maybe it's UFC, maybe it's Power Slap, maybe it's Fight Pass Invitationals. It is literally never ending, which is good because I feel like to work in any sport, but especially this one, you have to really love it. And so when you love it the amount that you do, you don't want off weeks. So the fact that we do so many events, like, I don't know, I wouldn't want off weeks. I wouldn't want an off season because what would you do with all that time?
Oh man, I could only imagine now. Like, I mean, as you're talking, I'm thinking about myself with like even the content creating. Like in the 9 years that I've been doing my show, I took 6 weeks off in the summer. And after the second week, I was like, I want to record. I want to put out something. But I really needed that little reset. And I feel like I've gotten so much wiser in a weird way. Having the time off makes you appreciate it also. You said something really interesting. I wanted to ask you, and I don't know the answer to this. Have you always been an MMA fan, or did you marry into it? Did you stumble into it because of work? Like, what's your sort of fandom appreciation of the arts origin story?
So mixed martial arts, no, I have not always been a fan. And not that I wasn't not a fan. I just didn't really know it existed. I did Taekwondo when I was little. And so I had like a base from a really young age and like the idea of martial arts. And then I grew up in New Jersey where wrestling was huge. I had friends that wrestled all through like middle and high school. And it wasn't just like, you know, like hobbyist wrestling. Like the state finals for high school in New Jersey was held at Boardwalk Hall in Atlantic City, which now we went back there for fight night and it was a little weird being there because I was like, oh, we go to like, 18,000 capacity stadium and then we're in Boardwalk Hall in Atlantic City. I'm like, this is a little weird. But so I grew up around a bit of combat sports. And then I went to college. I started working in Division I and Olympic wrestling. And I worked in that sport for like 7+ years. Came to know it really, really well. That's how I met Zach, actually. Coach Zach. Funny you call him that since you didn't go to wrestling class.
I've never taken one wrestling class, but that's Coach Zach.
No single wrestling class, but it's fine. It's fine.
I do real wrestling. Pro wrestling, baby. Yeah.
But yeah, so I worked in wrestling for many years and I came to know the sport really, really well, love the sport really well. But kind of toward the end, I was like a little burnt out on it. It's really, really hard to make a career in wrestling. It's an incredible sport. The athletes are amazing, but the interest isn't there. The money isn't there the same way it is in another sport. So I was getting my master's degree. I was in Arizona and I did this project on Henry Cejudo. I was friends with his nephew and I was stressing over finding a subject that was cool enough to do a documentary on. And my friend was like, oh, I can just ask my uncle. I was like, who's your uncle? And he's like, Henry Cejudo. And I was like, oh, that name sounds familiar. And I like looked him up and I was like, oh yeah, the Olympic gold medalist. And at this time he wasn't champion. So I worked with him for several weeks. It was like, I told him, I was like, this is going to be a little intense. Like I have to do interviews and like film so much of your life and it has to be more than just the training. So I got to see a really raw perspective of an MMA fighter. After I finished up that project, we kept working together and he actually brought me to UFC 238, where he fought Marlon Moraes. And so I got to go through, I didn't do the whole fight week, but I flew into Chicago and I did like maybe the presser and the weigh-ins. And then on fight night, I sat with his family, watched the whole thing.
Real quick.
Yes.
You're not UFC yet.
Not UFC.
Okay, cool.
Not UFC, but I started through doing this. And like also Zach wrestled Cody Garbrandt 1-1 in the Ohio State finals for wrestling. So anytime Cody would fight, we would watch.
Gotcha.
Other than that though, I like didn't really follow it too much. So now I'm on I'm physically at a UFC event. I had been to one prior to that, but it was like classic Vegas experience. So now I'm at this UFC event. I'm like in the content headspace, right? And at this point, I was like, okay, I think I want to work in MMA. And if I'm going to do it, I'm going to work for the best option, obviously. And I remember sitting there, there's this video when you're in venue that plays right before the main card starts.
Oh, it's
it
so
only
good.
plays.
It's so good.
It's only in venue.
It's impossible to watch that and not want to like fucking
like
go
run
and
through a wall.
fuck shit up. Yo.
Seriously,
Yeah.
4 years, like we hear it. I can't even listen to Baba O'Reilly anymore, the song, because I think, oh, the main card's starting. Anytime I kind of go out and I watch that video, but the very first time I ever saw it was in Chicago, and I was sitting next to Henry's between his sisters, and I remember watching it, and I said out loud, and it was weird because I was like, why did I just say that out loud? I said out loud, I can't wait to work for this company one day. And it was like this weird, like, I guess it was manifesting. I didn't really like believe in that stuff at that time. I just said it out loud, and I was like, why did I say that out loud? And yeah, so I knew then, it was super clear. I was like, I always knew I wanted to work in a combat sport. It's like the one area where I've always felt maybe not equal to the athletes, but I didn't feel less than, which made it a lot easier to sacrifice all of the time that I do with my husband, my friends, my family, when the athletes appreciate it. So for me, combat sports, once I put one foot in that door, I was like, oh, it's got to be this. I can't go do any other sport. I miss wrestling from time to time, but I get my fill. So
Damn, that's such a dope ass story. Fuck, man. I'm thinking about the promo package too playing, and I can imagine what you were going through listening to that. You said something interesting. That was one of the questions I wanted to ask you about feeling equal to the fighters. Fighters are, and I've always said this even before I moved here, like if you listen to old shows of Veterans Minimum, I respect the MMA fighter more than any athlete on the planet. And in most cases, even more the amateur dude who's going to put his life on the line for $400. And then after everything he got to pay, it's like $80 he's bringing home. Remember one time I was talking to one of the fighters at the gym, and I was like, yo, you know, when you really think about it, you kind of make like the sacrifices that you put into everything. It's a wild, and he was an amateur guy. Like, bro, this is a crazy way to make a living. So I respect them the most. Do you feel, because you train, we train together, you're a blue belt in jiu-jitsu. Do you feel like the fighters respect you more because you do train? Do you ever get that sense?
I don't really ever tell anyone.
Oh, okay.
However, I think an athlete knows when you've done your homework, right? So like we interview these athletes. I interview these athletes multiple times a year, almost every single one at least once a year. And admittedly, in MMA and in media, we all ask similar questions, right?
Sure.
So it's not like I'm not going to ask this groundbreaking question, but an athlete can tell when I've at least done the bare minimum of homework, or if I like know what I'm talking about, or if it's my first week working in MMA. When I first started, I was so scared to interview people because I was like, they're going to know. They're going to know that I don't know. I don't know jiu-jitsu. I don't know striking. I only know wrestling. So I leaned into that. But in short, no, I don't really tell the athletes that I train. There was one time where an athlete was being not difficult, but just like not super welcoming in an interview. And they were telling me about something at the gym, 2-a-days, camp, gym life, like the community. And they were like, I don't even know why I'm telling you this. You don't know what I'm talking about. And their manager actually stepped in and was like, no, she trains like every day. This is when I was training every day. I definitely don't anymore. And the athlete like immediately was like, wait, really? And I was like, yeah. And they were like, well, why didn't you say anything? I said, well, it's not about me. It's about you. What I do doesn't make a difference in your fight or the outcome come Saturday. So I don't really tell people. If someone knows or they notice or they bring it up or ask, I'll be like, yeah, of course. Love training under Shane and Jerry, and training at Syndicate has really changed the way that I think about the sport and the way that I do my job. But yeah, I don't really advertise it, mostly because I'm not good. If I was better, I would probably tell people. Maybe when I'm like a brown belt, if I ever get there. But I don't know. It's weird to be like, hey, I do jujitsu, but I get
Yeah.
triangled by 16-year-olds.
Well, the reason why I asked that is because like one of the, it's weird, right? Because I always get this interaction from people where, you'll get into it with someone on social media or like just talking in general. And I've had the privilege of meeting so many athletes and celebrities that come in here. And I go and I talk at the UNLV journalism program. We've got a really good relationship with those guys. Shouts to Isaiah. That's how we got Isaiah, our camera and video guy. Started as an intern and now he's like over here, right? So like I go and I like talk to the kids. And one of the questions I always get asked is like, well, do you ever feel like since you didn't play the sport, you have the right to talk about it? Or like, you look at these people that are on ESPN or Fox and, they're in there in their suits and whatever it might be. I'm just like, that's never crossed my mind one time. Because especially like the reporters, they weren't pro athletes. The majority of them, like they were nobodies too. Like everybody starts off the same, right? And then eventually you get on a bigger platform and now your opinion means something, or like you're a pro athlete. And I always tell people like my thing is betting. Like I don't think anyone knows betting as well as I do, as far as like, well, why is this the number and why is it like that? And then you see the athletes that now have to talk about betting. It's like, you don't even read the line correctly, but I'm not over there trashing you for it. Now I'm bringing it up just to add context to this. So for me, it's never been like a worry, but I'm also not a female in this space. And I know how much criticism women get in the sports media field alone. What are the pressures that you got to deal with? Because I defended you one time, if you remember, when you was overseas.
I always talk about this.
Yeah,
Actually.
you were overseas. I forgot where you were at, but someone tried to get at you. Abu Dhabi.
Yep.
Someone tried to get at you for something, and it was like, oh, she doesn't even know what she's talking about. And I had time that day. I had time, and I was just like, yo, first of all, I know the work you put in from talking to you, talking to Coach Zach, and like, you really care about this shit. You wouldn't be where you're at now if you didn't. Mm-hmm. But like, I was like, nah, bro, she does her homework, but it was just a typical guy interaction with a woman. Mm-hmm. How do you navigate through that?
So on social media, I actually don't look at the comments ever because I'm so soft. And if someone says something that like makes an impact in my brain, I'll think about it. Like I'll be in the middle of an interview and I'll think of something mean that someone said. So I just don't really look at the comments. But that specific like instance, I remember because we were leaving Abu Dhabi and I was sitting getting ready to board a 14-hour flight. And I saw this like comment about it was because I was standing too close to Islam Makhachev. And we have I think a great working relationship. I've worked with him for 4 years, have always been respectful of him and his religion and his culture.
Yes.
And so like to the point that like I stress about what I'm wearing and I make sure that like in no way can anything that I do or say or the way that I carry myself, can it be interpreted wrong or as if I didn't think of the person I would possibly be speaking to. So for me, that one like hit home because I was like, this is probably one of the things other than like studying technique and the facts about the athletes, like being appropriate and like always keeping the differences between me and someone else in mind and respecting that is like at the forefront. So that I was like, I was mad. I was going to answer. And then I was like, oh, I'm not going to answer. And everyone around me was like, don't answer, Mckenzie. And then it came back up and I saw that you had responded. And I was like, oh, that's my dude. But the pressures, they're there. It would be silly to act like they're not. But for me, and it's been like a bit of a journey, and really you have to be in an environment that lets you grow and like really fosters growth. And that has been the biggest thing for me at UFC is I've been given a platform to like try and fail and try again and take what I've learned and do. Like there has been no no's for me. It's been, do you want to try this? Great. Oh, you don't like doing this? Okay, well, let's pivot. So when you have an environment that really allows you to grow in the direction that you're going to naturally, there's a little bit less pressure. because it's not like, oh my God, I have to be perfect in this moment. And every single time I have to be perfect. It's never going to happen. The pressure really comes from other people. So if like 1 million people watch an interview, you know, maybe like 50 of them personally, and they know you. Everyone else is like, it's daunting because you go straight to, these people are judging me, or these people are questioning my value or why I'm here, or why I'm the person doing this interview or giving this report, whatever it might be. So I use that pressure that I feel and I try to switch it into motivation. So like, I can't control what people will think. Someone will always be pissed, right? Or someone will always find a mistake or interpret something differently. What I can control is, was I prepared? Like, did I do all of the studying to the point like where I know these people's birthdays and exactly how old they are, because maybe someone's birthday is during fight week and I don't want to say that they're 34 when they're 35 actually on fight day. Do I know the ins and outs of where they were born, the country they were born in versus the country they represent, and all of the places they've lived? I can control that, right? Like, I can control the questions that I ask. Did I watch the fight? Was I able to? Do I know the background of this athlete based on conversations I've had with them before? And if I've never spoken to them before, did I take the time to try to at least put a face to the name once? Those are all the things that I can control. And the reason that I do those, I guess you could say, is because of this pressure. Because no one will ever be perfect, none of us. But if you don't strive for perfection, you'll fall way further from it. If you shoot for perfection and know that you can only do your best, then the discrepancy there is just human error. And it's not woman error or man error, it's just human error.
For sure.
So pressure is there. It's always going to be. And I think women are sometimes under a more intense microscope. And the margin for error is much smaller.
Oh, the criticism comes flying out the woodshed all the time, because our show the show has evolved so many times, but just like being in the content space for so long and doing a lot more behind the scenes, I started asking people that do content, describe what you do in a sentence. Like, what's your show about in a sentence? And then I didn't have an answer for mine. So then I said, best sports betting vibe on the internet, right? So like, the show is predominantly sports betting, but if I have a common interest, like with you, I know you, we train together, we're friends, you cover a sport that I love for the biggest promotion in the world. And it's like, all right, I can have her on the show and it makes sense, right? So like, the pressure is, I just think that means that you care about something if you have pressure, and if you're stressed out about it. You know what I mean? Like, that's a good thing. And you said something before in passing about like how you're soft. I find that hard to believe, because her +1 is a dick and I love him. But like, that's the kind of, like, Zach is, and I've said this, like, Zach is one of my favorite people here in Vegas, because he reminds me of my friends back home. Like, my friends and I going back home, they'd be like, you got fat over the holidays, huh? So like Zach is like that, but I like that. Like, I like people that, develop thick skin. So that's why I'm shocked that you feel like you're soft.
It makes no sense, first of all, that he's from Ohio, because like his core is pretty East Coast. And honestly,
yes.
If he were to hear that, he would like cringe.
All right, last couple questions here, because we are running out of time. Actually, I'll save that one.
Ooh.
What are the differences between live TV and pre-recorded? I kind of have an idea, but like, I've only done live taping 3 times in my life. And then I streamed on Twitch, which, like, I'm in my boxers playing Fortnite and FIFA. So like, not a lot of pressure there. Give me the pros and cons of, let's go with live TV first.
I think in live television, the best version of yourself is what is brought out, because it has to be. There is no like doing it over. There's no oops, let me redo that, let me start over. When you go live on a broadcast, on a UFC broadcast, it's like you're held to the same standard. It's not just the best organization and the best fighters in the world, but it's also the best people. And it's not just the people that you see either. Like, our audio techs, camera ops, the producers, the people in the truck, like every single person that's there is the best at their job. So actually, you want to talk about pressure? I will never forget right before I made my broadcast debut in Macau, right before the very first hit at the top of the show, it was like long. I mean, a minute is long in live television. It was like about a minute, maybe a little more. I thought I was going to die. Like, I don't remember that. I literally blacked out, which I do sometimes when I interview people. I'm so in the zone, I black out. This one, I was like, it was nerves and a little bit of fear and like, oh my gosh, everything I worked for in my whole life and career is for this one moment.
60 seconds.
Right, for 60 seconds. So I literally, like, I couldn't feel anything, but I could feel everything. I thought I was going to die. I don't remember it. I like blipped a little bit, but we kept going. That's the thing, is in your mind, you're like, this is live. What do I do if I mess up? And that's what's always in your head, is like, what if I mess up? What if I mess up? And you have to like shove that out. So live television or whatever form it might be, the best version of yourself comes out because it has to. And every single time you surprise yourself a little bit, because I think everyone doubts what they're really capable of. But when you absolutely have to do it, it's like your body kind of, and your like muscle memory takes over, and you just go and you coast. Maybe not coast, because it's not easy. But the other side is like pre-recorded stuff. I do a lot of interviews. That's like the majority of my work. And I would say most of those are post-fight interviews, which are very like on the fly. There are times where like I didn't, because what we do is like I do the interviews, but I also edit them and we get them up on a site and we provide the public with scorecards and we do live results and we write, like there's so much that we do for UFC.com. There are times where I've interviewed someone and I didn't see a second of their fight, but I can't let the athlete know that, because they're giving me their time. So I better figure out quick what happened in the fight. How can I rewatch it? How can I read what happened? How can I find out what were the big moments? I never ask, what do I need to ask this person? But what did I miss? What's the biggest thing that happened in this fight? That one, those post-fight interviews are tough because those are never going to be perfect. Sometimes you have a really good night. Sometimes you just have a really bad night. Sometimes you have one bad interview, and because of your short memory, you can go on and have a great rest of the night. Sometimes it just gets to you and the rest of them suffer a little bit, maybe not always. Like, you might notice, because like you work in this field, the average person might not notice a bad interview, but like we all are our own toughest critics. So like for me, like an end of the world interview, the average person might be like, that was great. What were you talking about? Then the other side, third side of the coin, I guess, is like more sit down style interviews that are like longer form. You've got more time to really like dive into stuff. Those are like a whole different thing, because there's so much research and studying that goes into something like that, because it's like you kind of have to craft this story, but you don't know what the person's going to say. So you can like have an idea of the structure of what you want to talk about.
I'm immediately thinking about podcasts, because that's how I put shows together with people.
Exactly. And someone could like veer off in a direction, and you either have to go in that direction or you have to bring them back.
So that's a sign for me of a good host or interviewer. If they do go off on a tangent, are you going with it? Mm-hmm. And then I call it controlled chaos, because there'll be times where like, even though someone watching, they might be like, how'd they start talking about fucking Ohio wrestling? Mm-hmm. It's like, I bring it back to, well, Zach, or, you know, your significant other got you into MMA. Well, you know, like, I always try to bring that conversation back to where it was. So I call it controlled chaos. Anytime I interview anybody, like with you, for example, I sent you, I don't know, 6, 7 bullet points. And I try to use one to segue into another. And I felt like the question I wanted to ask you didn't fit where I thought it would fit in this conversation. So I'm saving it for later. So again, that's also trial and error. And I think you said something before. I wanted to chime in, but I wanted to let you finish. Do you feel like, you know, before you said that you basically asked the same kind of questions, do you feel like that's a gift or a curse when you're doing those on the fly interviews during fights?
It's both. I think knowing that I've got like a core
Like fallbacks.
question. Yeah, I call them like throwaway questions. I don't love that. I try not to use throwaway questions, but there's always going to be one, at least one. I think
But it doesn't mean that it's a bad question.
No, and it might be relevant. It's choosing the right throwaway question,
Bingo,
right?
yes.
Choosing the right one and choosing it on the fly, also while listening to what the person is saying.
Sure.
I think that it's both, because sometimes you're not getting. Sometimes you might not feel great about an interview because you're like, oh, I totally missed these 3 things and I forgot to ask them about this thing that we talked about earlier this week. But then also at the same time, when there is a moment where you've literally not seen the fight because it was a 5-second knockout or whatever might have happened, knowing that, okay, I know that I can have a conversation with this person, because that's all an interview is, right? It's just a short conversation. Knowing, okay, well, I have at least 3 questions that'll get us to 2 minutes or 3 minutes or whatever it might be. It's more of a blessing than it's a curse, but it's a little bit of both. Definitely. The hardest thing, if you ever watch the pre-show on ESPN before every event, those interviews that are done by whoever the reporter is that week, so like Megan for a pay-per-view or whoever is on the ground as the reporter, those are the most stressful thing I think I've ever done. And it's just a 2.5 minute interview, but
Is it the ones after weigh-ins?
Yep. Pre-fight, after weigh-ins, because it's like you have 2.5 minutes to encapsulate all that is this fight and the whole camp and the week. And you have, it's like such small
They're
real estate.
dehydrated from a
They're
weight cut.
dehydrated.
Yeah.
So normally sometimes they're post ceremonial weigh-ins, but when I did them, it was like they were fresh off the scale. And I was like, hi, do you want some water? And they're like, we gotta go. I'm like, yeah, but can we please like get them some water, because
they're
and,
dying
like
over
when
here.
your mouth's really
Yeah,
dry
yeah.
and like right here.
Yep.
Yeah. I'm like, okay. Those are the hardest thing I think in terms of interviews that I've ever done, and I have never stressed more about them. In fact, I'm already stressing about the next ones that I'm doing. I'm already thinking about those pre-fight interviews that are used for that pre-show. I'm already like, what am I going to ask? I got to know, because that's stressful. But yeah.
Fuck yeah, man. That's so cool to hear, because I love how people either put their... I'm a fan of people that care about their craft. Like, to me, that's a big thing. Like, I feel like it's an honor and a privilege that I'm doing everything that I'm doing, because grew up a lifelong sports fan. I still bet to this day. I'll always bet. That's like my rule. Like, I'll never not bet. And then when I see someone like you that's really into this, it's like cool to try to pick your brain to understand like your thought process with how you go about your questions. Because I don't want to be a reporter ever. I like this long forum conversation stuff. You get to learn, and I'm sure you have too, like the biggest difference between a talk show interview for 8.5 minutes where you're looking at the clock and it's winding down, as opposed to you sit with someone for an hour. It's like you really get to know the person. I've seen some of the pieces that you've done with like 15, 20-minute conversations. Those are my favorite. Like, I'm a fan of long forum interviews because it's easy for me to bluff around your questions. I could give you like generic answers to things like, how was your weight cut? It was difficult, but I made it through. You know, like shit.
Best
Like
camp I've ever had.
best camp I ever had.
You're gonna see the best version of me come Saturday.
Yeah. Like
It's gonna be a war.
I'm leaving with my hand raised, like, all that stuff, right? But like when you really talk with someone for an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours, it's hard for you to fake the funk that long. Eventually, the real shit's gonna come out. So I like hearing the different type of things, because like again, I don't see myself ever doing reporting. So I like picking your brain on that. That's really interesting. Last question I have for you. We kind of touched on it before, but like, give advice to someone listening about being a woman in the sports media space. Like, what's like the best advice you would offer?
Whew. Except that it's going to be a lot of really hard work. A lot of hard work, and there's like no easy way. but it's so rewarding. There will never be anyone who advocates for what you want more than you will. You can have incredible bosses, great mentors, and they can make a difference, but they won't actually get you there. They'll help you get there, but you have to want it more than everyone else wants it for you. So it's a lot of hard work. Working in sports is a lot of sacrifice too. Friends, weekends, holidays, family stuff, like you often, that comes second. You're missing a lot of it. You also have to surround yourself with the right people, because this is like a whole separate tangent. I'm going to do my best to keep it short, but I'm just going to have to come back so we can talk more about this. The people you surround yourself with define who you'll be. If you're surrounded by people who are empowered, they can empower you. If you're surrounded by people who are not empowered or who aren't fulfilled, you won't be fulfilled or empowered by them. The biggest person who's made the biggest difference in my career in the shortest amount of time has been Megan O'Leary. She's an incredible mentor. I'm blessed to call her a friend. I love her to death. Just by being transparent, always like, I could call her right now and she'd be like, "What's up, babe? What do you need? Everything okay?" She'll be in between reports, outfit changes, interview, whatever, and she'll come up and be like, "Everything okay? What do you need?" That's someone, a single person who can change the trajectory of a career. She did it for me. So surround yourself with the right people, accept it's going to be a lot of hard work, and don't accept anything other than success, no matter how long it'll take. I've been working in sports for over 10 years, and I wanted to be a broadcaster, and then I didn't, because I didn't want to do the local news journalism whole thing. I accepted that if it was meant to be, and if I worked hard enough, I'd get back to it. And I did. And it's still very surreal. And it's like the work isn't even close to being done. I don't think it ever will be.
You're just getting started too. Like you just called, like you were just on a live broadcast
for the first time.
November.
Yeah.
And you've been doing this for 10 years.
Yep.
And like some people would see that and be like, "Oh shit, this happened overnight," right? Which drives me crazy. That's the thing where like you're offending me. I don't get triggered or offended by many things, but like I've had a lot of people hit me up as of late, and especially the last time I went home. They're like, "Man, where'd this come from?" I'm like, "No, we're not. We're not doing this. We're not doing this."
Can I get tickets?
Yeah. Oh, I got that too. Yeah, we went, and I'm sure you probably get that shit too. But like, I had that with Cameron and Mace. I produced their show and edit, and my involvement with that. Now they're going on the tour, and like, you know, I couldn't wait for those interactions because I love confrontation. I like conflict. I like being like, "Yo, Mckenzie, what's the problem?" I don't want to text it, or like I hear it from 9 different people. Like, "What's the issue you have with me? Let's talk."
Your Dars.
Yeah, let's talk and see what's going on. And yeah, I've gotten those interactions too. But like you said, we could do this. We could do this another time. This was great. I'm glad we got to do this. I appreciate your time. I know it's a very busy week for you, with all the travels going on. Thank you again. I hope you got something out of this too in this conversation. Let the people know where they can find you on social media.
At Mckenzie, McKenzie.UFC. On Twitter or X, there's no dot. But that's it. Those two. That's all I got.
I'll make sure to have that if you guys are watching this on YouTube and in the description of the bio. Good luck to you traveling this week and for 2025 here with the UFC. Good luck to friend of the show, Merab, has been on the show before, won the belt. Fighters post VM appearance, a lot of good things happen. We're 9-0.
Okay. I just did a great interview with Merab on UFC.com. We looked back on Noche. We talked about what's to come at UFC 311. He talked to me for 30 minutes. English is his second language, and he talked to me for 30 minutes and crushed it. It's a fantastic interview if you guys have time for it. Go ahead and watch. Yeah, I'll try to, if I can, I'll get the link in the description of the episode. All things Veterans Minimum are at Veterans Minimum. We'll catch you guys.
I'm a gold medalist, bronze like your medal is. So many deer in headlights, but it's bedtime. Hear that supper bell, main course, be the venison.
Dab. Most dangerous game. Either kill or be killed.